We've learned how to use UI and interact with like boxes and buttons and software and layers. What AI has done now is it's taken down the walls of everything. So you can interact at like a conscious level, if you will. You're having a conversation with this thing that understands things, that has memory, and then you can task that model to go do things on your behalf.
Welcome to the Building Better Portfolios and Lives podcast. I'm your co-host, Josh. I'm here with Paisley, my co-host. Glad that she's back. And we're here with our special guest, Donny Smith. And Donny Smith is the Chief Design Officer of Bttr. And this is an atypical podcast interview for us because Donny is not in the investment world in the typical kind of guest fashion that we've had in the past. But Donny is a big user and a big proponent of AI. He's using it in his business. He's seen AI transform the business, the world of the business that he's operating in. And so we thought that it'd be really fun to have Donny here talk about the impact of AI. So Donny, with that said, let's just start with our typical first question to our guests. Tell us about your career.
Thanks, Josh. Happy to be here. I'm excited to talk about AI and design. My career, I grew up in California around, 15, just had the bug to get into some creative field. I've been a prolific illustrator and had no real understanding that you could make a career out of design or illustration. So I did a bunch of research, and funny enough, one of the best schools in California is a school called Art Center College of Design, and it's up in Pasadena. It was a design trade school that was founded for all the GIs after World War II. It's kind of a way when they came back to get into the trade of design and industrial design, and it's very well known. There's only about two really kind of big schools in the U.S. There's RISD, there's Art Center, and a few others. I went up there. I took a tour at 16, and all of a sudden I was like, this is the mecca of design. It's a polished concrete. It's a Craig Elwood famous industrial design building. It looks like just a black monolith up on the hill. You drive in, just leaves this impression on you. Wow, this is unlike anything I've ever seen before, and this is where it happens. This is where things are made, that are designed. You see big clay models of cars that are full scale, famous cars. Volkswagen Bug, originally came from a designer that went to Art Center. Zack Snyder, famous director, went to Art Center, and you come to find out that a lot of people, their roots come from that school. Immediately knew that's where I wanted to go. And after the tour was over, I went and talked to the counselor, and he's, the average student body is 25. So you're not going to come out of high school. And okay. So what do I do? And he's like, go to school, have an experience, really assess if this is what you want to do. And if you're serious, start working on a portfolio. So I did. I basically filled, went to right out of school. I went to San Diego State and just had a little bit of everything just to kind of have a well-rounded educational experience, focused a lot on philosophy. In the meantime, I was just building my portfolio, putting everything I had into it, and I applied and I got in. And that's where I basically have been grinding in the world of design since I was 22 years old. I inherited coming out of school during the Great Recession. And I think we all can talk about that and how it relates to our lives historically. And I was looking at going, leaving school in the creative field and walking into probably the worst job climates in history. So I quickly found an opportunity to do an internship at one of the very well-known advertising agencies in Los Angeles called TBWA Shy Day. And this is an internship that was unpaid. I think they all have to be paid now in California, but this was unpaid. And I came in and they said I could help out. I said I'd do anything. And I quickly became, useful and instrumental in a lot of the things that were currently kind of happening inside the agency. And as I started as an intern, we had just won at that time. I was in school, was Pepsi as a client. So Pepsi was just going through the whole process of rebranding, and they own Gatorade. And in that process, I worked on redesigning the new Gatorade logo. I got to redo all the packaging for Gatorade. Got to work on, all these different projects from Apple, Nissan. They just had a number of just incredible blue chip clients, and I just immediately jumped into kind of the industry, probably at one of the most exciting places in town. And my internship was coming to an end, and I was like, I have to go back to school. And they said, well, would you work here? And I'm like, yeah, of course. That's really was my goal the whole time. So I took the position as a designer while I was in school, and then I continued to work and graduate at the same time. So I basically figured out how to hedge and not come out of school and start going door to door looking for somebody to take in some green designer. And it's been fast and furious since. Interesting thing about graduation, funny note, Elon Musk spoke at my graduation. He was the speaker. He spent the whole time, he didn't have anything prepared, so he was kind of pitching his new car and how important it was. It was a Tesla Model 3, and he kind of did it with it was a press release. And I remember somebody in the audience, because we had a massive, transportation design, class, and they yelled out, "Are you hiring?" And it was so funny. And
it's supposed to be a commencement speech, and he's selling his products. As we say in our industry, always be selling, always be closing.
Yeah. Always be closing.
And yeah, that was wild. So, career right out of the gates, jumped into all these massive projects, and I was there for almost another year, and I decided I want to do more things, and I took an opportunity to work on when Volvo came back to the US to go through their new rebranding. So I worked on the rebranding of Volvo cars, a lot of all their beautiful new designs. I had the opportunity to work on the brand guidelines for, and ever since then, just working as a journeyman freelance designer, just following my heart and working on the projects that are exciting. And it brought me back to California, and ultimately at Dollar Shave Club. And Dollar Shave Club is kind of one of the first unicorn subscription businesses, and remember the famous commercial. So I had an opportunity to join that team when it was less than, I think there was about 3 people on the creative team at that time, and just it was I guess it was getting my master's in, small, a startup environment, and incredible creative. Some of the smartest, most talented people in the industry kind of all came together with all this, shared vision of what it could be, and watched that kind of skyrocket and ultimately become acquired by Unilever. And then about, a couple of months after that, I went and started my own business, just to decide to get after it on my own and see how far it could take me. And since then, I've been running a pretty successful design agency, and we're about 6.5 years now, and it's been very exciting. And now we're kind of at the latest chapter, which is AI, and AI is something I'm excited to talk about because it's, as I said before, it's revolutionized the entire industry. People have no idea the tidal wave that's coming. Some do, but it's all good. If you're a true creative, it's just unlocks so much potential. You can do so much more. It's never been easier to build amazing things. And if that's what excites you, then there's not enough hours in the day. You can't get any sleep because there's so much you can now do. So I'm excited to talk about it and talk about how it's affected our day to day.
One comment I might have just out of the gate is, we talked about this a little bit as we were preparing to go live today, but AI has obviously infiltrated everyone's lives, whether you're sitting on the couch on your phone or you're in a boardroom giving a presentation. There's a way to incorporate AI to help ourselves be more productive and efficient. I think my biggest barrier, which hopefully many people feel the same, is the educational gap, right? So, and maybe we'll get into that today. Kind of asking you some questions, Donny, is just, how do you get up to speed? There's so many tools that are available now. Obviously, how everybody's using them is going to be quite unique. But from a training perspective, like a lot of the times I'm always wondering, where do you even start? So I'm sure we'll circle back to that. But
yeah. Well, I think it's always it's overwhelming. I don't think there's really a good place to to go and really understand how to utilize it to its full potential. It's it's kind of this thing where you look at it as this new tool that you have, and then you almost go, any problem that you're faced, whatever you're doing, you go, how can I apply this tool to accelerate that process or really multiply, my output? And if you kind of look at every problem that you immediately just start, reaching out and finding ways to integrate that into the process. And it just becomes an extension of the way that you work. And then you solve it naturally because you can interact with AI and have a conversation with it, which is incredible. And you can solve the problems, and it can be this educational process, while you're building, while you're building something. So I think the way that I've used it is I've forced it, and I've been excited to do it. How can I use AI here to make this easier? How can I automate this thing? How can I look at this and go, what do I need to set up so I can I always call it this God mode, or this hive mind. How can I tap into this collective of this super intelligence? How can I bring that into my process? And if you can find a way to bring it in, it just it's like on steroids. Yeah, and that's what's just, if somebody was to come to you 2 years ago or 3 years ago and say, what if we just gave you this ability? Your head would explode. What? That'd be insane. So I still have that, I still have that excitement for it. And I think most people, if they don't have it, it just hasn't gone through the process of really understanding it. And it seems mysterious, and, everyone's kind of preying on people's fears of it, but it's not anything to be, it has its flaws. Eventually it won't. That's one thing, but yeah, you can interact with it, and just see where it takes you. And I can go into the details of the things to use to do it specifically if you want to kind of know that. There's basically, like, for what everyone naturally kind of deals with it, it's almost like Google. I'm just going to ask it questions and it's going to answer things. Okay,
that's how
one
I
way to use it. But like, what if you...
Which is why, to your point, like, until you've experienced the actual productivity that you said is like hitting this whole vessel that can help supercharge what you're working on. Most people, and maybe most people are listening to this saying like, Paisley, no, we actually know how to use it. You're the only one who's not. But I use it like Google. You ask a single question, maybe a follow-up question. You're like, oh, this is a great tool. And that's such a baseline use case. That's like 2021 use of like AI.
What it is what we're kind of going into this process where we've all learned how to use UI and interact with boxes and buttons and software and its layers. What AI has done now is it's kind of taken down the walls of everything. So you can interact at a conscious level, if you will. You're having a conversation with this thing that understands things, that has memory. And then you can task that model to go do things on your behalf. So you can have it interact with your web browser. You can have it interact with Photoshop, interact with Final Cut, interact with 3D software. So instead of you clicking things, like, you then use these things, MCP, so you can interact with that thing and remove the process of using a mouse or a keyboard. So it's a direct line of communication to the thing that can then build things, and you can use AI to kind of facilitate that, which is incredible when you can really start to unlock that.
Donny, what's an MCP? And then also, how would somebody start going down that path of trying to use kind of AI in a more agentic way? I think is one way to call that, where it's kind of like an agent that's working on your behalf, doing something. How have you been able to accomplish that, and where would somebody start, do you think?
So it's really easy. There's this thing called Claude Code. It's the number one thing I'd recommend. There's a lot of others that are doing a similar thing. It's by Anthropic. So Claude Code basically will install, you're interacting with a model at a terminal. So at the base layer of your computer, you're having a conversation, the matrix, the blinking green. You're talking to the model, but then the model can then go do things on your behalf to your computer, which is, oh, do you want me to say, for example, you've got 50 different receipts in a folder and it's on your desktop, and you go, to install it, you basically install it. That'll take you 5 minutes to understand how to install it. But once you install it, you can say, can you organize the files on my desktop and put them in a spreadsheet? And say, yes, of course. Are you giving me access to your desktop? Do you give me permission? Yes, you have permission. And then it would go and organize everything and say, where do you want me to put this? What file do you want me to create? That's a very simple use case that, imagine.
My mind's already blown.
Imagine having.
I'm so far behind. Like, keep the examples coming.
I have receipts from 13 months ago I still have not taken care of.
So that process, I think that's one example that has allowed me in my business to do things that I couldn't have done before because I just didn't necessarily have the time to learn that accounting software. I didn't have the ability to quickly parse through all this different information and get the answers that I needed, make progress in the business. I would be relying on members of the team and having to do it in a manual, personal way. And now what it's done is it's just given the ability, as a controller to, you're almost an octopus, and you have all these ways that you can interact with all these different parts of your business, from your email to your Trello boards to Confluence, all the things that you use to run the day-to-day. And you're doing it and it's supercharged with this agent that knows, it can solve problems very well. It can solve things to the point where before it had a lot of limitations with math. I'm sure you know about like math. It's like the funniest thing in the world. It'll just lie. It doesn't know math at all.
Yeah,
like
we programmed it that way for our own job security, Donny.
Cracks me up. But then there's workarounds for that you can connect it with something that does understand how to run a spreadsheet. So it's really, there's no real limitations now. Things that are happening just today. Video editing has always been obviously very challenging. Video, music, cuts, animations, all the things you can imagine. There's a lot of steps in, the speed in which you control an object in an X and Y, coordinate. But if you can direct it, you can tell the AI to do it, and now it can interact with Final Cut. It can interact with video software and make you these incredible, animations that you normally as a design agency would have to work with a motion designer. A motion designer to contract with them to build you this animation, and then you're going to use. Now you can you can do most of it yourself. And there's always going to be the need for the creative director with a point of view. Like, that's irreplaceable. And I worry for the people who don't have a point of view. The skilled practitioners who are just kind of really good at doing it, but they don't really have a reason for why they're doing things. They're just getting good at the specialization of that thing. They're screwed. It's the people that are, just want to say something, create something, those are the ones that are really starting to kind of pull away.
I think that's a good point you bring up, because even in our industry, there's a lot of conversation around AI, the implication that has on jobs, and everybody becoming fearful we're all going to lose our jobs. And ultimately, the jobs that this replaces are typically lower paying jobs, more things that are automated anyway. And if you think about over the last 50 years just in the world, I mean, a lot of those things that people were having to do manually 50 years ago, we've already automated. So it's just the natural evolution of technology. And so I think, again, regardless of what industry that you're in, if you still have a strategic brain and you're still engaged, like, you're going to have a job. And now this is going to allow you to do your job better, quicker, more robustly, whatever that is. So encouraging that, our industry, your industry, others as well, are all benefiting from this in the same way.
I always like to remind people that if you go back, and this is right, these are loose numbers for the data, but 100 years ago, there's something like 40% of the U.S. population was farming, and that was like the job, right? And now it's less. It's somewhere between like 1%
except for during COVID, when everybody started trying to garden again and make sourdough bread.
Yeah, they could, and then they realize how hard work it is. No, that's just the way technology is, right? Like, technology and efficiencies and all these things get better, and then it just frees people up to do things that they couldn't have done before. And I also joke that, like, if you look at influencers, like, I think there's some ridiculously high number, like 25% of the population or something identifies as an influencer or as a job.
Josh.
But it is true. It is true. Yeah, financial influencers. Number one podcast on finance,
worldwide financial podcast right here.
Worldwide. But it's true. If somebody 10 years ago would have told me that there would be people who would be posting pictures on from their phone onto some website, and that they would be making millions of dollars a year, I'd be like, you're crazy. Like, even probably the top models in the world at that time were making maybe something in the millions. And there's influencers that are making 5 million, 10 million, 20. I know people that are making 20 million a year. And it's just, and that has been born from technology and this advancement. Now we can argue whether it's good or bad. I mean, I think that's still can be debated, but the reality is it's happening. So, Donny, I'd love to shift this back to, I'd love to focus on your industry, how you think AI is completely changing the landscape of your industry, and then kind of come back to a little bit more of this, how you're using it in your business to optimize things, make your business better, make it more efficient, improve margins, those things, if that sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds great. What it's right now, there's this kind of like complete retooling of like SaaS products. These big giant, bloated SaaS products that have you in these awful contracts and that are based off of, the number of seats. Their days are numbered, like for every SaaS company you can, because you now can make your own bespoke software that'll do exactly what you need it to do for your job. And it's not to say, you always hear these stories, oh, I just saved this company $10 million. They've just left Quicken, and now this guy is vibe coding his own, financial software. It's not there yet, but there's their tranche of all of these other software products that these subscriptions that people are signing on to just do these small specific things that is hard for them, that makes their life that much easier, but they're paying $20 a month for it. They're paying $30 a month for it. And now if you have, the right technologist on the team, you can go through and create your own bespoke dashboards that can do everything that you need to kind of keep a pulse on the business. The opportunity for the design world is going and trying to help facilitate that new type of, ability to tap into the customization world of making things that are bespoke to them. That is, previously they would have to go through, jump through a bunch of different hoops. They would never actually own the IP of the software. They would, a lot of times their data would be held hostage. Well, now it's going to the point where you own it yourself. You can control your own data. You can set up your own models, and then you build something custom for what you need. So the design world right now is really trying to, connect the creators and the developers with the businesses that are ready for that change, that are ready to kind of break the ties of some of these bloated, agreements. So that's what's I think in the next 6 months, that's just going to be the massive change, which is great. I think that for the day-to-day of what design is it depends on what it is. It is a lot cheaper to build things now. And then there's more time in the saddle to work on solving the harder problems. So everything is going to improve. There used to be a massive barrier to entry to building software, really challenging, big teams in order to do it. It was a lot harder. Now you can take, a senior developer, and you can, work almost as a team of like 10 people in a week, and you can build incredibly robust, quality products that you could never even imagine doing, 2 years ago. So what is that? That's just, how is that going to change everything? How is that going to change where now, like, it's almost this new industrial age. You now have this new age of software where everyone has now have that, that ability. And how is that going to change things? I think for the people that are paying attention, like, they're just going to just pull ahead crazy. And the folks that are not utilizing these tools are, it's going to be harder and harder to catch up. So, that, I think that's going to be, we're watching it now. It's almost, what camp are you in? Are you in the Luddite camp? Are you in the techno optimist camp? Where are you at? Choose your team. And I think the important thing to do is to just remind everybody that we haven't fixed everything. We're so far behind. We haven't solved all the problems. We still have, potholes, traffic jams, we haven't eradicated diseases. We still have hard problems that need to be solved. Until we crack that, then we can start having these existential questions of, I'm going to lose my job. It's like,
I was talking to somebody yesterday. I was up in Seattle and was just kind of talking about, like, it's 2026 AI was going to take over the world. We were going to have flying cars and robots walking on our streets, which both of those are kind of actually true. But there's so many just basic things that we're still struggling with as a society. So it's funny, but I actually have a question that something has come up a lot in our industry over the last probably 18 months is when we think about AI from a business perspective, a lot of the benefits have been reaped by the big names, right? The Oracles, the Apples, the Metas, and then the Nvidias, of course. And the conversation in our industry has become like, when do the little guys, when do the small businesses, the local businesses, even your company, right? You guys are lean and mean. When do those companies start to see increased profitability, better margins, better just operational efficiencies in how they run their business? And obviously your business is at the forefront of that because you're using this as in a kind of day-to-day capacity, but just conversations you've had either with clients that might be bigger companies or even medium-sized companies. If you have any thoughts on either personally how it's helped your guys' business from a profitability standpoint, revenue standpoint, or how you've heard through working directly with clients, I think might be interesting for some of our audience too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, democratized, technology, and it's given the power back to the people again. Like we've seen this seismic shift, and you can cop the big guys they're these slow incumbents are in trouble now again. It's like in that season, and it's harder and harder for them to wield that much influence if everybody then has this incredible power. So I think that this is great. Things were stagnant for a really long time, and now I think it's gone back to the people again to do it if they choose to, in terms of doing it their own way, making it custom, not needing the big guys. You no longer need them. You have the combustion engine now, and you can build it in a kit. It can send it to you, order from a Sears catalog, and like build it in your garage. Now you can drive 100 miles an hour. Like you're off the horse. The thing about, I think that what's happening in the day-to-day of things, that you have to utilize it and you have to use it in all things, and you have to kind of train yourself to kind of think agenically. You have to think of this as just an extension of you. It's an electricity, and if you don't think that way, then you're not competing at the level of the pros. The job right now is with the customers, that some of our bigger clients, for them to really understand how it works. It's an educational process of doing the job of saying, this is how it works. Don't be afraid of it. I will walk you through the demos of how this is, and I will then hand over this code to your team, and then they can go through it, and just slowly allowing them to adopt it. The big thing, let's say a year ago, was everyone was afraid of their data. Oh, I could never have OpenAI on my corporate computer because it's gonna take all my data. It's funny how nobody talks about that anymore. We're in that kind of the next chapter of that is, well, I don't want to have any agentic developer within our code base right now because it could just, it could break everything. Well, there's ways that they've solved that now. So it's not breaking everything. It can be all handled in a way that's very safe and vetted and integrated into the current code base in a way that's, is a massive improvement. So it's a slow process, but it has to be done in a way that is kind of walking them through it. And then they become believers in how it does work. And then they have this epiphany, and then they have this expectation. And then that's what they're demanding from everybody. We're not there yet. It's still a bit of a cheat code for a lot of people, to use it, but it's not the expectation from everybody that you should be using it yet. And the ones that are kind of using it on everything are the ones that, again, are increasing their margins, are not getting the frustration of some of these bigger tasks because they're just throwing it to, the hive mind and allowing it to kind of solve it for you.
Donny, I'd be interested maybe if there's like one or two actual examples of what you're doing right now in your business you're finding great efficiencies that maybe somebody else who's a small business owner or somebody who could, like, real world, like this could really make an impact for them.
Yeah, so this is an exciting one. We built a massive website for this company in Q4. We did it with a pretty small team, and it had probably, let's say 30 different stakeholders on the other side. And it was in a regulatory environment that they had to legally approve everything. And this stuff can't go out if it's not completely vetted and signed off. A Herculean effort to do that with let's say 100 pages, like pages of work and all this stuff. The process before is super manual. What we set up on our side was this ability to basically monitor, and anybody at any time could interact with the product and leave comments and say things, make changes, and improve it. And the agents would then go through, parse that information, and understand the problems that needed to be solved. And then it would action those tasks, and then they would serve those up to us to approve. Do you want to do this? Here's what from last night, here's all the things that we now need to do. From the international teams have checked in and said, we need to make these changes, this changes. Here's the list of everything. Would you like to make those changes? Then globally those changes were then pushed and changed across the board, and then eventually shared back with the client, and then they approved it, and then it went to production. So that process would manually, it would take an incredible amount of time. Everyone's weighing in, everyone's making changes, but allowing an agent to go and monitor everything and make the changes on the fly, and then actually doing the code itself and shipping that code was wild to watch. And we set up software that the clients could interact with. It was like almost ever heard of Trello? Trello is a card-based Kanban board, so they could go interact in a very kind of user-friendly environment to leave comments or questions, and the agent would then go interact with them, resolve their questions, and then find things that they need to work on, and they would iterate on those, and then they would come and come to solutions and do research if necessary. So it's like they're asking a question, instead of the creative going back and trying to solve that for them, the agent would then go and do the heavy lifting based on certain requirements, and then bring that back and be like, how does this look, boss? Is this what you were? Is this okay to build? Yes, of course, build it, and then you build it and then share it back. Wow, that's amazing. That's exactly what we needed. You're basically going back to your other point about doing these things that are repetitive. That's a repetitive task. It's not a creative task. It's just the manual, you're just pushing pixels. It's just time in the saddle to do something that's not fun. It's kind of a entry level in our world. So it's farm that out to an agent and let them handle it. And then, if you're going to go back and check everything, but that amount of time that was saved just accelerated everything, and it gave us more time to, work on, the final polish of everything. So stuff that was just a complete game changer. Other examples is I have the AI set up in a way that everything that I interact with just on a terminal basis. So I don't even open up my email. I don't open up any of that software. I just basically start my day of like, what's going on?
So like what
hello Jarvis.
What tool are you conversing with, or Claude?
So I use Claude.
So you're just like Claude,
so
like
Claude
morning, like what's up, what's going on out there? Tell me everything I need to know.
Yeah, I have a dashboard of everything, and it's refreshing all the time. So I open up the dashboard, I look at everything, I can kind of see everything high level. But in terms of, instead of even reading my email, I'll just what's important in my email today? What do I need to kind of focus on? What are some of the things that, and it will say, this is all archived. This is important. This is something to talk about. Here's a draft of this particular thing. Would you like me to send it? It just jump starts some of that really, boring, work that is keeps, we don't enjoy. The email work, a lot of it is, I have this answer. Let me think about it. I have to go here. I have to go there. I have to go there.
Yeah, it sucks up a big part of your, even like simple stuff that's like, okay, this is super easy, but like to your point, that can suck up 30 minutes of your morning. So we should have done this live and just stood behind you and just like shadowed you for a day.
Yeah, it's what, if you have this vision of what we've been raised on what it could be, we kind of already know how it should behave and what's the best case scenario. Best case scenario would just make it for me.
Yeah,
we're getting close.
That's awesome. Okay, so maybe the last question I have before we wrap up would be, this should be a simple one, maybe not though. So you have how many people are on your team in total?
So full-time, we have 8 full-time creatives, internationally based, but then we have contractors and freelancers that are very specialized in categories.
So let's say like for the of the full time. So if there's 8 full time people, like if you weren't utilizing AI on a daily basis, do you think 8 people would need to be 10, 11 people? Like I'm just trying to think from like a productivity standpoint, like how many people, even if it's like an entry level type role, do you think you would need to bring on to do all of this efficient work that you're getting done with AI now?
The folks that are on our team have been with us for, the last 4 to 5 years. They're some of our best designers, and they really kind of control an army of agents. And so we're working at the same scale as where we were. We have a much larger team, but we've now just kind of trimmed it back to just really the people with the best taste. And we're doing the same amount of work, if not more, and we're doing it faster. And we could bring things to be kind of a solo entrepreneur and do everything. But the reality is like running with multiple clients, have kind of different teams and squads that work with these clients, and then they're project managers, there's designers, UX designers, and they kind of work together and solve these problems. But then it's kind of underwritten by AI powered, if you will, and it's a good setup right now. I don't necessarily want to. We've done the process of going bigger, and there's a level of complexity to that. We're in kind of the phase where we just have gotten back to just the love of making the best work possible and designing the best solutions possible. And now that we have more time that we've kind of freed up, we can spend that extra amount of polish.
Yeah, it's great.
So it's a good.
So last final question. Anybody who's made a mark on your career, helped define your career, that you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I've been, this is a tricky one. I think I'm going to go with, my creative director at Dollar Shave Club. His name is Javier Hall, and he's one of the coolest creatives I've ever worked with. Incredibly talented and a true technologist, an inventor, an entrepreneur, and he was a force, and he left a really strong impression on me that you can be a polymath that can really go deep in all these different arenas and make a massive impact. And he's just had a incredible career, and I think that he's probably left the most positive impression on me.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. Well, thank you for your time today, Donny. As Josh mentioned at the beginning of today's episode, it's a little bit atypical of our Building Bttr portfolios, but I will say Donny's firm is named Bttr. He talked about having a portfolio. There's some overlap here, and we all are using AI, so this is why we felt it was such an important topic, and so really appreciate you giving us some of your time and expertise today. So appreciate everybody who tuned in for this episode of Building Bttr Portfolios and Better Lives. That tagline is very key for this episode. So good to meet you, Donny. And as always, Josh and I will be back next week. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and do not reflect the views, opinions, or policies of any current or former employer, affiliated firm, or client. The content is provided for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered investment, legal, or tax advice. Nothing discussed constitutes a recommendation to buy or sell any securities or investment products. Listeners should conduct their own research or consult with a qualified professional before making any financial decisions. The hosts are speaking solely in their personal capacities, and the podcast is not affiliated with, sponsored by, or endorsed by any firm or organization with which they may be associated.